What are some of the, I guess, common mistakes from maybe a legal and tax perspective that you see people make when they move or they are living overseas for an extended period of time? We don't even need to use the word fully moving. Even if you're planning on spending 6 months in a different country or 12 months in a different area of the world, that's still under this umbrella.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest misconceptions about moving and working somewhere else is that the US won't tax you on that income. But the US has a very unique tax system. So when you're a US citizen or a green card holder, or you spend a certain amount of time, you've spent a certain amount of time in the last few years in the States, even if you're not a citizen or a green card holder, you are taxed on your worldwide income from a US income tax perspective. So let's say you're moving overseas, you're working for a company, the US will still tax those funds. Now, depending on what country it is, there might be a treaty that allows for, certain credits or reductions. The Internal Revenue Code also provides credits. So you're not necessarily going to be paying double tax, but you still need to file in the US. You need to claim that income, you need to show what you earned, and then you need a qualified CPA to then put in those foreign tax credits to make sure that you are reporting everything properly. It may not be exactly wiped out. It depends on, you're working with two different jurisdictions. And so you probably also need to pay tax there. So you need to have a good tax professional wherever you are living and working. Another thing to think about is if you have, foreign bank accounts or other foreign assets, foreign companies, there's reporting requirements. So there's an FBAR requirement, and the dollar amount's fairly low for a bank account, in that foreign jurisdiction. But even beyond that, there's forms that you have to show what companies you have. And if you don't file these forms, the penalties are very substantial. So before I started practicing law, the big thing was people would put money in Switzerland in Swiss banks. And then there was a whole big case with UBS where basically everything got blown up. Like people became aware of these accounts. And so for many years in the beginning of my law practice, I was helping people who were US who had foreign assets clean up their reporting. And sometimes the penalties and interest were in the millions for
Whoa.
people, or even for people who are, we call them accidental US citizens. Let's say they were born here, but then they moved back to wherever, their family was from when they were two. They didn't even know they're US citizens. Technically, they still have worldwide, income and also reporting requirements. So just making sure that, kind of going back to that, like first thing I said, that you have a team who understands all of this, because you don't want to try to do, this is not a situation where you want to DIY,
Yeah.
because the risks are it's just too great.
Yeah.
The risks are too great.
Yeah, I appreciate that statement because I lived in Australia for 5 years, and my first year, I was right out of college. So, 1, you don't understand anything about
Yeah,
taxes
no.
because you
Yeah.
learn, geometry, but you have no idea how taxes work, and I didn't realize I had to file US taxes even though I made no US money that year. I made fully in Australia, all of my income in Australian dollars into an Australian bank account, and then I met with a specialist who specializes in US American expats in Australia filing their US taxes. And just like you said, because Australia has an agreement with the US that I can prove that I made Australian income, that I got taxed Australian tax, that I'm not going to get taxed US as well because of that income, but I still had to file my report and I had to file my FBAR, which proved that I had a foreign bank account that reached a certain threshold of US dollars. So I think right now it's 10,000 US dollars in any account in any given time. So it's not just like one account. Like if you had 5 bank accounts and you tried to shuffle your money around, not going to work. And then at the time, they were just creating a new rule that if you were a US citizen trying to open up an Australian bank account because you were living there, some banks literally wouldn't take you because they didn't want to deal with the US system of filing with the IRS. That's how intense it was. So, yeah, like you said, it's just super important to remember you have to file your taxes every year. You need to make sure, even if you're not making US income, working with a specialist both in that country that you're living in. What's really interesting right now, and Lauren, I don't know if you have experience with this with clients, But a remote worker working in a different country, but like let's say a freelancer, they own their own business. They're working in another country, but they're making US income. But there's this discrepancy between, but I'm living in a different country. It's not, there's like this little la la land or like fantasy land where that money is just tax free. And it's just not true. Like you still have to file taxes. I don't know if you've come across clients who just didn't realize that because they were out of the country, they still had to file their
Yeah, well,
taxes.
that has definitely come up with my US clients in the past. And it's also come up with clients who are non US, but there's different rules depending on the source of income. So if you're non US, but you have US source income, then you still have to pay US income tax, even if you're maybe operating in a foreign country.